Hi, and welcome to another live episode of Marketplace Masters, brought to you by Merchant Spring, the leading marketplace analytics platform for Amazon agencies and vendors. Marketplace Masters is all about going deeper into the challenges that brands and agencies face to lift performance via practical actions and insights. I'm your host, Paul Sonneveld, and today we're going over how to organize your Amazon agency to deliver success for your clients and how to set up your agency for success as well. Now, to help us do this, I've invited Tom Baker to join us and to share his expertise. So let me introduce Tom to our audience today. So Tom, still on mute there. Tom is the founder of FordeBaker and the CEO, and FordeBaker is a global Amazon marketing and operational agency for ambitious brands. The agency provides a one-stop shop for brands, and Tom now leads the business development and client strategy at FordeBaker across Europe, North America, Asia, and Australasia. So he brings with him a broad range of experience today, and it's great to have you on, Tom.
Thanks for the invite, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here and to share our learnings from the agency as we've grown over the last few years.
It's fantastic to have you, Tom. And you know, where I want to start today is I want to talk a little bit about your personal story. I'm always interested in, you know, how do agencies start? How do they come about? What's your story? What drove you to start an agency?
Yeah, so I think it is a very personal story because it comes from my own experience actually being in-house. I was in-house with lots of different businesses for sort of 10, 12 years, and used lots of different agencies in that time, not necessarily for Amazon, but for SEO, Google ads, Facebook ads, and also a lot of marketing tech vendors in that time as well. So I saw, you know, lots of different types of agencies, locally and globally, and I kind of learned I certainly learned a lot from those different agencies that we work with. And more specifically, about 6-7 years ago, took a job head of marketing for a toy company, and I kind of landed Amazon on my desk. I'd never done it before. I'd always been in the sort of traditional digital marketing space, as I say, with Facebook and Google and so on. So Amazon was a completely new thing to me. I looked for an agency at the time to help me do all those things. So I got plenty of other things that I needed to get on with. But I couldn't really find an agency that I thought had the breadth and the depth of experience and expertise that I wanted to be able to meet my ambitions as head of marketing and the kind of global aspirations that we had for the brand at the time. So we decided to do it in-house. I tried to learn everything as quickly as possible. It was a massive learning curve, as I'm sure it's the same for everyone. You make a load of mistakes along the way, but you start to grasp it and you start to understand how it all works, all the different aspects of selling on Amazon, how to do that globally, and so on and so forth. And in the end, we had a really successful time of it. That quickly became sort of a third of that business's revenue within sort of 18 months. And so, I was quite proud of that fact. And I thought, well, look, if I've had these challenges along the way, there must be thousands of other sort of brand managers, head of e-commerce, head of marketing people in-house that have got the same experience, that are asking the same questions, got the same challenges. So can I take what I've learned over the last 2 years and provide that as a service to those people? So that was sort of about 3 years ago. I started freelancing, as you do, picking up a couple of clients and doing everything for those clients myself. Obviously that gave me that was a real eye opener, because what I'd learned within one particular brand was just a very small slice of actually what goes on with Amazon. But then starting to work with new clients in different categories, seller, vendor, so on and so forth, really opened me up to sort of all of these possibilities. But I was able to sort of provide that service, and we had a great time with those first few clients. And actually, they're still with me today. Actually, those first 2 clients, and so that developed into the agency, and quite organically and naturally, really. But that,
So I'd love to ask, how did you sign your first client? It's always getting that, particularly as you're starting out,
yeah.
getting that vote of confidence. How did you persuade and convince them to give you a go, right?
So I mean, first and foremost, I was extremely lucky. Like as I say, those two clients are still with us, and they kind of started just about the same time. I think part of it was, when I say I was lucky, part of that was down to timing. In the UK, and actually it goes back to what I was just saying. They were brands, established companies that wanted to maximize the opportunity on Amazon, but just had no idea how to do it, but were struggling to find someone that they could trust, that was really credible, that could take that on. And so it's actually about kind of building that relationship with them. I think it'd be a different type of conversation today, because obviously a lot of brands are more familiar with Amazon now, but at the time it was a case of there's a real dearth of people that providing sort of either sort of consultancy or agency services, particularly in the UK, more developed in the US definitely at that time, and still is. Um, but they were sort of open to the idea. I think obviously I've shown them what I'd done when I was in house, and I could talk their language as well,
Yeah,
which we'll probably come on to later. Like I
yeah,
know what your challenges are being in house. I know that Amazon's this. That the Amazon's this massive opportunity, but you also know your limitations as a business, and therefore I could sort of fill those gaps, and understand what they're really trying to achieve, and where the sort of pain points were for them.
yeah. Oh, that's great. So today we're talking specifically about roles, structures, trade-offs, processes. To help contextualize that a little bit, can you paint a bit of a picture of what your agency looks like today, Tom? Obviously you've done a tremendous journey, really growing out of that. I'm a one-man band, I'm a freelancer, I'm a bit of an expert, and I can do everything, to actually having a team of people around you. So just paint a picture. What does your agency look like today around some of the key parameters?
Yes, so we're sort of organized into 3 team functions. Okay, so we've got our creative team, which are working on listings, storefront, ad creative, so copywriters and graphic designers that are doing all of that work. We've got our marketing function, which covers PPC, DSP, SEO, listing optimization, external traffic into Amazon. So all of those kind of, we would call that sort of marketing channels activity in Amazon. And then the final column, which is the area that I head up, is the account strategy. So our account strategy team, as the name suggests, are there to develop the strategy, but we also do a lot of the operational work. So the kind of day-to-day management of Seller Central and Vendor Central, inventory planning, all of those kind of things. So it's a combination of the two things. So we've got a nice, perhaps we'll come on to this in a bit more detail, but we've got a nice balance between the kind of specialization within marketing and creative, and the all-rounders within the strategy team as well.
Yeah.
And so we find that that's worked incredibly well for us. It's a very scalable way to work.
Yeah. What does it look like in terms of numbers wise? And, are they all UK based? I mean, we're all kind of remote first businesses these days. What does it look like in terms of geographical spread too?
Yeah. So from day one, one of the sort of central tenets of the agency, and as I learned from being in house, was that we had to have a global aspiration. And to be able to prove to clients that we're able to actually deliver globally, we had to sort of recruit globally. That kind of makes total sense, but sometimes that's sort of glossed over. So we're an international team. We're dotted about all over the place. It's not just because of the pandemic that's kind of forced us to work remote. There's a very conscious decision. It means I've been able to recruit the best in the market, and we've got a really diverse team, which I think adds a lot, not only for our kind of client work, but also as an organization, to have lots of different experiences and backgrounds within the team. So we're up to 16 people now, recruiting 3 roles at the moment. So anyone listening that wants to apply, please do.
Anyone listening, I'll happily take a recruiting fee on the back of this. I'll
we'll
provide
do We'll do a referral fee for you. Yeah. So we're recruiting at the moment. So we'll get up to about 20 by the end of this year.
Yeah, great. Well, that's great. Just, seeing that growth from, starting one to actually, running it as a sizable agency. It is also a great segue to start thinking about roles and structure in particular, right? So, let's start with structure. How do you think about roles in your agency, maybe today, and, how's that evolved as you've
Yeah.
grown?
So I think, just bringing together some of the points that we've touched on, if we do a sort of like potted history of working with Amazon over the last sort of 6 or 7 years, and maybe the slides that I've got will just kind of show us a little bit more about that. So this is a very, very simplified version of what's happened with Amazon over the last, as I say, kind of 7, 8 years. So kind of stage one, and this is where I was when I was in-house. I had enough experience across performance marketing, SEO, content, operations, those kind of things, to be able to kind of run it myself. Not saying I was brilliant at all of those things, but I was good enough at all of those things to be able to make that a success. And I'm sure lots of people will have been in that situation at the time. Essentially, the reasons why I was able to do that: Amazon advertising was very rudimentary at the time, pretty basic. It's definitely not there today, which we'll come on to in a second. There was greater organic growth opportunities to be had. Amazon hacks, as I've described it here, some of those actually worked pretty well at the time. Like, obviously people were getting reviews through fair, schemes and whatnot, or using super URLs and so on and so forth. So these sort of like weaknesses, as it were, within the system did work to some degree. Naturally, there was less competition back then, and also really, really importantly, there were fewer brands, was established companies in the space. So me as one person, essentially acting as a generalist, doing a little bit of everything, could actually be really successful. Now, over time, obviously that's evolved. The marketplace has matured, as with every kind of platform and marketplaces. So kind of stage two, the development on from that, brands obviously start to take notice. If we roughly speaking, just pre-pandemic and obviously into the pandemic, you get more and more brands coming onto the market. Amazon put a real kind of emphasis on advertising and start to develop the ad console into something more complex, but obviously more useful. Amazon starting to clamp down on a lot of these sort of grey hat tactics that people use, and also the opportunity with Amazon becomes much larger. Not only is the audience growing, but the international scope of what Amazon are doing becomes much greater as well. So understanding all of those different things, like FBA programs across Europe, for example, like there's a lot to learn, as well as doing content, advertising becoming more sophisticated, there being more competition as bigger brands come onto the market. And so what we start to see at this stage is the need for specialization. And that's really been sort of one of the fundamentals of our structure as an agency, is understanding this sort of journey that Amazon's going on, and that trend, and then our organizational structure reflects the way that Amazon has developed over time. So us as a full service agency, as I say, we do everything. We're kind of one-stop shop for our clients. That means that we need to have specialist skills in all of these different areas, because it's a full-time job to keep up with advertising changes and do a really great job with that. And if someone can do all of those things plus a myriad of other things, then like absolutely fair play to them. They're a genius, and like full credit to them. But us as an agency being able to do that at scale means that we have to have specialization, and that actually, what this is all about really is delivering the best results for our clients. So we've found that over time, that specialization has become increasingly important, whether that's graphic design, copywriting, advertising, SEO, listing optimization. Those things are specialist skills, and they should be treated as such. They're professions in their own right, just as Google SEO or doing paid social, or full-time roles as well. And then we have our, as I say, our generalists, so our account strategists who are overseeing everything. That's a tough job. And, you've got to learn a lot, and you've got to have that kind of global outlook on everything as well. And you've also got, from a very high level of like, what are the objectives? What budget do we need? How do we decide which products we're going to prioritize? Answering those big chunky questions, but also like the minutiae of stranded inventory and all of those kind of pains that we all go through. So I think that works really well for us as an agent. As I say, we're full service, so it works really well for us to have generalists sort of overseeing things, and then specialists in their particular channel and function.
Yeah.
And
So
just
what does that split look like between generalists and specialists now? You said, around, 16 to 20 people.
Yeah.
What does that rough split look like in terms of
It's
generalists,
actually,
account management?
yeah, so it's so I'd say like 2/3 of the team are sort of specializing in particular functions. So, and I think that's a really nice balance for us to have. Account strategists have a group of clients that they will look after, and then oversee, set the objectives, and then work on the delivery, and then the rest of the specialists are obviously working on the execution and the practical elements on a day-to-day basis within the account.
Yeah. So in a model such as that, where you're using both specialist and generalist, obviously there's only one client, but multiple people working on an account. How do you set responsibilities and accountabilities? Where does the box stop with the client in particular?
Yeah. So that's a very, very good question. So the way that we do that is there's a clear, and we have a couple of slides that we show to everyone when they start. There's a clear relationship between the things that people are doing and particular KPIs that we're measuring. So the most obvious and simplest way to explain that is, so the PPC specialist is responsible for ACOS ROAS KPIs, right? They're not responsible for the IPI score. So there's a very clear relationship between the thing you do and how that's measured, and it's the same across all of the roles within the company. And then that's obviously visible across the team, so everyone knows that. I don't know, if there's an issue with conversion rate, then we go and speak to the listing optimization team. They're responsible for that, and obviously the things they do will influence conversion rate. So it's just about that connection between the actions you take and the KPIs that we're attaching to that work, which is largely common sense, but I think actually visualizing that and discussing that helps people to understand, particularly if they're not completely familiar with every kind of KPI or metric and all the Amazon jargon. So like actually displaying that, taking people through is really critical. And also for our clients, so actually saying to them, like, here's your team, here's your account strategist, they're your main point of contact, they're responsible for this, this, and this. You've got your PPC specialist, and then everyone else, here's the things they work on, here's the KPIs that their performance is measured against. And again, just that visibility and being able to show people means a lot.
And actually, I think as you're talking about setting different KPIs and communicating it to the clients, maybe I'm inferring here, but does that mean that there are multiple touch points with your clients from within your organization? So it's not just the account strategist that's talking to the client that presents that umbrella interface.
Yeah,
you've got multiple points of engagement with your clients. How does that work at your agency?
Yeah. So what I mean, we try to be a very lean organization. So our account strategists are called account strategists and not account managers, because they're there to actually properly understand how Amazon works and be able to lead the strategy. Whereas there's a tendency in agency land, not necessarily within Amazon, but like to have an account manager who's there to sort of go to meetings, organize things, maybe do some project management, but they're not really experts within the particular channel of function or platform or marketplace that they're actually talking about.
Right.
So that's a really the most important thing, because they're like an account strategist will be able to talk to the client about pretty much anything within their account.
Yeah.
So most of the conversation is done by the account strategist, but yes, there's absolutely points where the the market, particularly the marketing team, because they're the ones spending the money or deciding which keywords we're using and so on and so forth, will come into those conversations with the client. Usually what we'll do is, an intro call with the client. So like just a very general sort of chat. Say, this is everyone working on your account. The account strategist is obviously the day-to-day contact with the client. And then let's say, the PPC specialist would maybe come back in a month's time to show what the advertising strategy is, what we've done so far, what the plans are for the next few months, and then kind of work on that kind of cycle. So those kind of specialists are not regularly in client meetings. They're getting on with the work. So that's what I say about us being a very lean and efficient organization. But what that means is an account strategist has to know everything, basically. Not great depth. They don't need to know what's the latest new targeting option within advertising space, but they need to know it in the very general terms.
Yeah, I guess part of the role they serve is to protect the rest of the team, not to spend the entire day in meetings with the client, right? And making sure you've got some effectiveness there.
Yeah.
So this links quite nicely to this idea of service models, right? We started as an agency, and you've got some very big clients that are really easy to serve, and you've got the really small clients that are super demanding. Different. No one client is the same. But as an agency dealing in human capital, you have the challenge of trying to run a profitable business and somehow aligning resources and cost to serve to revenue generating. How do you demystify, or how do you untangle that particular challenge at FordeBaker?
Yeah, so I think it's like an ongoing process to optimize that. I mean, that sounds very functional and like practical, but the reason I say that is we've decided not to go down a route of fixed packages, of day rates, and we don't do any time tracking for the team. And the reason for that was, again, just going back to my own in-house experience, was if an agency said to me, we're billing too many hours, or we can't do that because we've already done X amount of days or hours this month, then that's one, it's annoying. Two, they're not aligned, they're not perfectly aligned with what the client needs to happen and what their sort of goals are. Now, obviously, that can be taken too far. Absolutely, that can. The client can sort of take advantage of that. But if we assume that every client is a reasonable human being and a rational actor, then I think it's fair to say, look, this is roughly the amount of time that we spend on your account, and it actually might change over time as well. So obviously, we tend to front load a lot of the work. So say, like, let's say it's a business that's new to Amazon. Naturally, we've got to create all of their listings, get them set up in FBA, whatever it is. So there is a lot of front loading that can happen. And yeah, we don't make any money, as it were, on that particular on those first few months. But our business model is always about long-term relationships. And the way to do that essentially is to deliver great results. It doesn't mean to overload the resource. So you've got to strike a balance between those things. But it's absolutely about thinking long term and building a long term relationship with the client. So yeah, look, it can be a real sort of struggle to get that right. I think actually the way to sort of solve that really is actually before you start working with the client, is to make sure that they understand when you're talking about your fees, what they're going to get from those fees, and maybe give them a few different scenarios and say, look, not that we don't package things as like gold, silver, bronze, things like that, but look, here's roughly the amount of time we would spend on it for this amount. Here's roughly the amount of time we can spend on it for this amount. Like, and here's the kind of pros and cons, and here's the trade-offs of those different approaches. And clients will sort of tend to be able to kind of work that out for themselves. They know, again, just assuming your client is a rational actor, and they've got to meet their objectives, like explaining that if it's under resourced, then they're not going to get anywhere, and there's no point doing it. Then you can find the right sort of level to sit at, and then that should, in theory, then give you enough sort of financing to be able to actually properly resource that account.
Yeah. Are there rules of thumbs or tricks or maybe tools that you use to plan that workload and the resourcing against that? And in what time period do you look? Is that a kind of a monthly exercise, a quarterly exercise? I mean, how do you think about resourcing?
Yeah, so actually, a lot of it comes down to sort of agency muscle memory, if you like. So what I mean by that is, if we take on a client and they're in X number of countries and they've got X number of products or whatever, we roughly know what that is going to take in terms of days per month and how much we need to front load the work and how long things take. So we don't have like a perfect formula and some kind of calculation to say like this is the amount of days or whatever, but we just sort of naturally know sort of what those levels look like. In terms of like, there are things that we do obviously to plan resource and manage resources. So one is to have a project plan with the client. So say like, this is what is going to happen at a high level. Don't give them you don't need to give them all of the detail, but month 1, month 2, month 3, these are the key initiatives. This is what we need from you to be able to do these things. This is roughly when they'll be completed by, and we kind of refresh that on a quarterly basis with the client. And then internally, we use Asana for all of our project management. That's been like integral to how we act as an agency. So all of the briefing into the team, all of the sort of day-to-day conversation around workflows and actually getting things done is done through Asana. So we can sort of keep track of what's happening, what the status of that is, who's doing it, so on and so forth. And that, there's just no way, that we could have scaled up without something like Asana to be able
Yeah.
to help us project manage.
Did you start with Asana, or did you sort of evolve to Asana over time? Like, did you try other tools along the way that maybe didn't meet your need to the same extent that Asana does?
So we used Asana from day one. I think I'd used it in a previous organization, and just found that was to be like, it worked really well for us. We've definitely evolved with it along the way, and we have our own sort of processes, how we manage Asana and the templates we use. We've customized it basically to our needs, but it's very adaptable, so it works really well for us.
Yeah, that's great. Now, always good to hear what people are using on that front. We're always thinking about what is the next agency software we need to integrate with ourselves. So Asana is high on the list now.
Yeah.
Let's go to some really practical questions here around how do you keep clients happy. I remember the early days, and one of my frustrations with running my own agency was you can have 20 great clients, but there'll always be one or two. There's always a fire, right? There's always a drama. You're dealing with humans and people. And if most of them are happy, then it's probably a good week. But what is your secret sauce to keeping clients happy?
So I mean, this is definitely something that we've learned along the way. Like, I'll be very honest, and like, it's a learning curve. One of the downsides of me sort of being sort of in-house for 12 years, although I can talk the language of clients and those kind of things, but actually being on the other side of the fence, you don't know what that's like until you go and do it. So that's definitely been a learning curve for us. There's a few principles basically that we will work by, and this is something, when I bring on a new account strategist in particular, these are the things that we talk about, and kind of not drill into them, that's a bit extreme, but make sure that they properly understand, give them the examples, so they can get the context before they actually start to work with their clients. So I put a few onto a slide. So if we want to share that, and then I'll walk through those kind of principles. So if we just hop up, I think one more. I think, yeah. So there we go. So kind of 6 fundamentals. Now there's much more to client management than this, but these are sort of the things that we've sort of found to really help us that kind of make the difference, really. So first one is to recognize their personalities. So understanding who your client is, how they like to work, how they like to communicate, I think is really important. That does not mean you completely rip up how you work based on kind of their particular circumstances. But I think acknowledging that you're working with people basically, and you need to sort of adjust your approach for different types of people is critically important. So that's definitely number one. Managing expectations. So again, this isn't necessarily about, I think sometimes there's a tendency to sort of just try to do the best that you can without sort of explaining to the client what the sort of trade-offs are, what the pros and cons are, what the possible risks are, what the possible delays are. Now with Amazon, like we all know, like Amazon's just going to go and do something that tears up your nicely laid out project plan. So it's really critical from the early stages to actually explain how Amazon works, and how you work as an agency as well. So things like, you might say, look, I won't be able to reply to your emails within an hour every day of the week, or we can't do a meeting every week. It has to be fortnightly or monthly. Like, you've got to put some boundaries in place, but you've also got to explain that, how Amazon works and kind of what to expect along the journey. Next one, sort of adapt but don't fully customize. So this sort of relates to that first one about understanding the personalities that you're working with. So we definitely we don't have a very fixed approach, and where we are doing exactly the same thing in exactly the same way for all of our clients. Now, partly that's just because they're different types of businesses and they're in different countries and they're in different categories. There's all sorts of variety that goes on. But in terms of the way they want to work, like we set some boundaries around that. So for example, if a client says, can you do your project management through our project management tool? We say no. There are certain boundaries where we say absolutely not. That would just be a massive change to the way that we work, and it's just a step too far. Now, obviously, we'll use Microsoft Teams if they want to use Microsoft Teams rather than Google or Zoom or whatever. That's fine. It doesn't really make any difference. But like fundamental structural change to the way that we work, then that's a kind of no. So setting boundaries around that is really important. And as I said, I talked about sort of like a rational actor, if you like a reasonable person on the other side of the fence will understand the reasons why as long as you explain why, then the reasonable person will understand. So don't shy away from sometimes saying no to a client, because in the end you're doing things for the right reasons for their particular account. Quick wins. So this isn't necessarily about completely tearing up their advertising campaigns and rebuilding that straight away and increasing their ROAS or whatever. It's just about identifying what the priorities are and being able to show the client what you're made of, basically, so they can build confidence in who you are and what you're saying. So that could be across 1,000,001 different things, but I think it's just about showing that level of professionalism and expertise that builds confidence. Visibility is really important. So just transparency around what you're doing, when you're doing it, who's doing it. Obviously, all of the reporting, sales performance, all of those kind of things, really critical. We don't hide anything away from our clients. They have access to everything. They can see the reports, that we deliver to them through Merchant Spring, and obviously that's incredibly detailed, and that's a good thing. We shouldn't shy away from any sort of things that are not necessarily great. We've got to show them everything, and actually you'll get to a better position if you're just sort of very open and transparent with the client. And then that kind of leads on to the last one, and probably the sort of most important one, which is about reducing uncertainty. So the biggest sort of pain point that I've found running an agency essentially is clients get unhappy, not necessarily that something hasn't happened or not knowing when or something's gone wrong. It's just when they don't know that something's gone wrong, or that they don't know when something's going to happen, or why something's happening. So reducing the uncertainty and essentially communicating properly to the client is critical. So that's the fundamental thing. It's like let's say your flight's delayed and you're waiting in the airport lounge and you don't get an update. That the frustrating thing isn't necessarily the delay. The frustrating thing is not knowing what the delay is, or when things are going to change. So that's really important.
There's some great nuggets there. I think, all of this stuff, you sort of think about it, and actually, you know what, if I was a client, I would like that. That seems like good common sense. It's amazing how I think the risk is you get busy running your agency, you get busy doing the doing, and you forget about these things. So I think being purposeful and mindful about it is really, really important. I was going to ask you, these things don't tend to come about because, from a theoretical standpoint, sometimes these frameworks and these ideas come about and the focus comes about from some painful experiences, right? And some hard learnings. If you care to share, I mean, what are some of the hardest learnings you've had to take in since you started your agency?
I think in the early days, it's not knowing. What's the right way of phrasing it? There are things that you just don't know that you don't know. I sound like Donald Rumsfeld, but if anyone remembers that. But there are absolutely things you are not going to know that you don't know. So like, let's take, for example, when I first started, I was in-house with a toy company, and I didn't know about sort of what we needed to do from a VAT perspective with Amazon. And then lo and behold, Amazon suspended the account because we didn't have the right information in there. So it's when you don't know the things you don't know. So that's and when, especially when you start an agency or any kind of organization from scratch, there's just things that you haven't considered. So there's always times where like we drop the ball, particularly in those early days. And I think it's just about being honest and saying, look, I didn't know that. Hands up, look, I will go and rectify that immediately. Here's what I'm going to do to address it. Here's when it will be done. So actually moving the conversation onto being proactive and solving it basically, and communicating that to them. As I say, like, people will be most of the time pretty understanding if something goes wrong. And I don't think you want to be in a situation where like you're fearful of having to message a client and say, look, this thing has not gone quite right. I'd always sort of err towards openness, and if they have a problem with that, you can address it later, but always sort of err towards that side. So I think that's the challenge, is just like there's always something new, or there's something you're just not aware of. But being very mindful of that.
Yeah, and I guess and I think you're mentioning it through your commentary there. It's not just acknowledging the problem; it's also how you respond. I certainly found in my time, how you respond. Every kind of disaster, there's a little bit of opportunity to show that you take them seriously, and you really to deepen the relationship when kind of crisis hits. Right? It's true too. Look, I'm looking at the clock here. We're about to cross over the 40-minute mark, and I know I promised you 20 minutes. But let's just cover one last topic, and that is I call it like the future of marketplace agencies. A bit of a vision casting question. Where do you see the industry evolve, and someone like FordeBaker, where do you think you'll be in 3 to 5 years?
So I think so right now we're specialist Amazon, full service Amazon agency. So anything to do with Amazon, we can take care of it. And so the natural step really for us is to do other marketplaces, and we're talking to clients about that, whether it's Walmart or some of the European ones as well. So obviously there's loads of different marketplaces, but I think like the real evolution for an agency like ours is into sort of this sort of burgeoning retail media landscape. So I think where we will probably end up is having that sort of depth, and it will continue to be full service, but there'll be this sort of layer on top of retail media. So kind of the bigger budget advertising across retail media. And it's obviously very early days for that space, and there's a lot of buzz around it at the moment. And we'll see how that develops. But I think for an agency like ours, that's where it's going to go. But also for, there are obviously Amazon agencies that only do Amazon advertising right now, and I think probably they'll evolve into something like that as well. But I also think there's always space, and there always will be, for specialization and sort of niching down onto. I would be absolutely fine if we stayed as we are as an Amazon agency, because there's just so much opportunity there. But we're always looking for new ways to evolve.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's certainly one thing we can be sure of is this place will not be static. Certainly,
No.
even just looking at the rate of change that Amazon's rolling things out, just trying to stay on top of that is a day job. And there's certainly, clients will ask for more services and broaden their remit, particularly if you build that trust in a particular area. So
yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we are out of time, Tom, so I'm going to have to wrap it up. Let me first of all say thank you so much for coming on the show today. I love the not just the expertise, but really just the passion. You can see, you're someone who cares deeply about your agency, serving clients, but also thinking really hard about, how you set yourself up. It doesn't mean you get it all right in the first place, but actually specifically thinking about those questions and trying to answer them as well as you can. So thank you for being generous and just sharing your knowledge, your experience with us. For any viewers that are interested in exploring your services, I always like to ask, how do they get hold of you? What's the best way to get in touch?
Yep. So they can book a free consultation with me through our website. If they go to FordeBaker.com, which is FordeBaker.com, you'll see the book consultation link in the top right. As I say, that comes straight through to me, and I'm, as you say, I spend a lot of my time talking to businesses, even if we don't work with them. It's a really enjoyable part of what I do as a business owner, and also wanting to I have a kind of passion for the Amazon space becoming more professional, more interesting, more collaborative for everyone. So happy to talk to people at any time, or grab me on LinkedIn. There's 1,000,001 Tom Bakers on LinkedIn, so search for Tom Baker.
You're the one.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. Till next time. And that's it for today's episode of Marketplace Masters. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, whether you've done that live or watched the recording. Great to have you. Don't forget to visit our website to check out all of our latest features and special offers for listeners of this podcast. And I look forward to getting together for our next episode in a week's time. See you then. Take care and bye-bye.